I started listening to the Rocketeens was the first band that played a single that just made me, that was what made me decide to play the guitar in the first place. That's a Swedish band. They came out with this silly song called Woohoo, and it's all this sort of woohoo, going through the whole song, woohoo, woohoo, really silly. But when it came to the guitar bit, it's like a sort of. And this is really early on. I'd never heard a sound like that before in my life. I just thought, oh man, that's it. I've got to. That's because I'd been playing piano, and I'm not really enjoying it too much because all I was taught at age 6, 7, 8, was classical stuff, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, and stuff. And a kid that age, not really interested. So I heard that. That's what made me decide to buy request a guitar, and I finally got one. And then I listened to the Ventures and Duane Eddy and Chet Atkins. And then I heard this guy live in a bar as I was walking home from a friend's place in LA. And I was walking along Sunset Boulevard, just about a block away from my house. And this fantastic guitar music was coming out of this club. And it was a guy named Jerry McGee. Do you know who he is? He plays for the Ventures now, but he did a lot of work on the early Monkees records and Delaney and Bonnie, and he did a couple of albums for John Mayall as well. But never really got the recognition I thought that he deserved. I mean, he's just a stunning player. But I was really into him. He's the first guy I ever saw use a thumb pick, actually. I knew Chet Atkins, since then I learned that, but I didn't know at the time. And, he was doing all this kind of, when I thought guitar playing was, So, I mean, I just never heard anything like that. First of all, strings came wound in those days, I mean, the G string, for instance. So he was the first guy I ever saw that. Then shortly after that, I moved to England, and I immediately got, well, not immediately, but soon, Shadows. I became a big Shadows fan, and then I was told, somebody heard the way I played and said, have you ever heard of Albert Lee? And I said, no. So we went to go and see him. And as it turns out, shortly after I was working at a music shop there, just because I was very young and only had been playing for a few years at this point, I was offered a job as rhythm guitar player in the band with Albert Lee. And it was called the Poet and the One-Man Band, which was the first incarnation of Heads, Hands, and Feet, if you've heard of that band that he played in. And I wasn't in Heads, Hands, and Feet because by then the original bass player in the Poet and the One-Man Band and I had joined a folk rock band there called Fotheringay, which was Sandy Denny's band that she put together after she left Fairport. So I was also listening to guys like Clarence White and Amos Garrett by the end of the 60s, and Clarence was the guy that I listened to hear, to get all that kind of country sort of steel guitar type licks. And I was living in the UK, so I couldn't see him. They didn't have any programs with the birds on it or whatever, where I'd been able to see that he was doing something weird with his shoulder strap. So I thought he was just doing it with his fingers. We never heard of any B-benders back in those days, and I think he was the only one that had one by that point. And of course, they became very, very popular as a result. And, manufacturers came out with their own versions of them and so on. But I was living in the dark in the UK, and I just could hear the records, and I just thought, well, I'm hearing him do it, so I know it's possible. So I was just finding a way to do it kind of without, I got to meet him, too, about a couple of years later, by which time I'd managed to get most of what he had done. I mean, some of it just baffled me, particularly things where he's playing a full chord and still, bending the note. I thought somebody must be standing there with him in the studio and just say, when he nods his head, okay, bend now, push behind the nut. But anyway, the B-bender was what. So I try to think, those are probably my main early influences. I picked up an awful lot of other people's too. I've got things from Hendrix, from Jeff Beck, from gosh, I'm trying to think, and a lot of lesser-known players too. Just people, if I hear something great, I usually will borrow it. And I say borrow because very often what happens is when I hear a lick that really inspires me, I'll find a way to play the lick, and then and then I really feel creative at that point, and I turn it around. I'll invert it and find different shapes and different applications, you know.